Sarupa Prakritim Praja Vilokya Mumuhe Sadhya Taiha Jnana Guveya Mataji's. Gunai Vichitra Srijatim Sarupa Prakritim Praja Vilokya Mumuhe Sadhyaha Sayaha Jnana Guhaya Gunai Vichitra Srijatim Prajaha Vilokya Mumuhe Sadhyaha Saiha Jnana Guhaya. Transliteration, please repeat after me. Gunahi, by the threefold modes. Vichitraha, variegated. Srijatim, creating. Sarupaha, with forms. Prakritim, material nature. Prajaha, living entities. Vilokya, having seen. Mumuhe, was illusioned. Sadhyaha, at once. Saha, the living entity. Iha, in this world. Jnana Guhaya, by the knowledge covering feature. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Divided into varieties by her threefold modes, material nature creates the forms of the living entities. And the living entities, seeing this, are illusioned by the knowledge covering feature of the illusory energy. Please repeat after me. Divided into varieties by her threefold modes, material nature creates the forms of the living entities. And the living entities, seeing this, are illusioned by the knowledge covering feature of the illusory energy. Purport. Material energy has the power to cover knowledge. But this covering cannot be applied to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is applicable only to the praja, or those who are born with material bodies, the conditioned souls. The different kinds of living entities vary according to the modes of material nature, as explained in Bhagavad Gita and other Vedic literatures. In Bhagavad Gita, chapter 7, text 12, it is very nicely explained that although the modes of goodness, passion, and ignorance are born of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, He is not subject to them. In other words, the energy emanating from the Supreme Personality of Godhead cannot act on Him. It acts on the conditioned soul, who are covered by material nature. The Lord is the father of all living entities because He impregnates material energy with the conditioned souls. Therefore, the conditioned souls are bodies created by the material energy, whereas the Father of the living entities is aloof from the three modes. It is stated in the previous verse that the material energy was accepted by the Supreme Personality of Godhead in order that he might exhibit pastimes for the living entities who wanted to enjoy and lord it over the material energy. This world was created through the material energy of the Lord for the so-called enjoyment of such living entities. Why this material world was created for the sufferings of the conditioned soul is very intricate question. There is a hint in the previous verse in the word Leelaya, which means for the pastimes of the Lord. The Lord wants to rectify the enjoying temperament of the conditioned soul. It is stated in Bhagavad Gita that no one is the enjoyer but the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This material energy is therefore created for anyone who pretends to enjoy. An example can be cited here that there is no necessity for the government's creation of a separate police department. But because it is a fact that some of the citizens will not accept the state of laws, a department to deal with the criminals is necessary. There is no necessity, but at the same time, there is a necessity. Similarly, there was no necessity to create this material world for the suffering of the conditioned souls. But at the same time, there are certain living entities known as Nityabadhas who are eternally conditioned. We say that they have been conditioned from time immemorial because no one can trace out when the living entity, the part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, became rebellious against the supremacy of the Lord. It is a fact that there are two classes of men, those who are obedient to the laws of the Supreme Lord and those who are atheists or agnostics, who do not accept the existence of God and who wants to create their own laws. They want to establish that everyone can create his own laws or his own religious path without tracing out without tracing out the beginning of the existence of these two classes. We can take it for granted that some of the living entities revolted against the laws of the Lord. Such entities are called conditioned souls, for they are conditioned by the three modes of material nature. Therefore, the word Gunair Vichitra are used here. In this material world, there are 8,400,000 species of life. As spirit souls, they are all transcendental to this material world. Why then do they exhibit themselves in different stages of life? The answer is given here. They are under the spell of the three modes of material nature. Because they were created by the material energy, their bodies are made of the material elements. Covered by the material body, the spiritual identity is lost, and therefore the word mumuhe is used here, indicating that they have forgotten their own spiritual identity. This forgetfulness of the spiritual identity is present in the jivas or souls who are conditioned, being subject to be covered by the energy of material nature. Jnana guhaya is another word used. Guha means covering. Because the knowledge of the minute conditioned soul is covered, they are exhibited in so many species of life. It is said in the Srimad Bhagavatam, 1st canto, 7th chapter, the living entities are illusioned by the material energy. In the Vedas also, it is stated that the living entities are covered by different modes and they are called tricolored, red, white and blue living entities. Red is the representation of mode of passion, white the representation of mode of goodness, and the blue is the representation of mode of ignorance. These modes of material nature belong to the material energy. And therefore, the living entities under these different modes of material nature have different kinds of material bodies. Because they are forgetful of their spiritual identities, they think the material body to be themselves. To the conditioned soul, me means the material body. This is called moha or bewilderment. It is repeatedly said in the Katha Upanishad that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is never affected by the influence of material nature. It is rather the conditioned souls or the minute infinitesimal parts and parcels of the Supreme who are affected by the influence of material nature and who appear in different bodies under the material modes. Om Ajnanathmirandasya Jnananjana Salakaya Chakshurunmilitamena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Tadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shuddha Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Cha Shri Rupam Sakrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vidam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Shri Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishagan Vitam Cha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesha Shunyavadi Pashyatya Teshatarine Vancha Kalpa Tarubhyasha Kripa Sindhubhya Padidhanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namine Gaurativse Namaha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishabhanu Sude Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. I was born in the darkness of ignorance. My spiritual master opened my eyes with the torch of knowledge. Offer my respectful obeisances unto him. Mukam karoti vatsalam pango langai te girim yat kripatamaham vande Shri Guru Shri Tinadarinam. Tavaivasmi na jivami tavaivina iti vigya devitvam naimam charanantikam. Hare Krishna everyone. Do you have a physical book? Yeah. Hare Krishna everyone. Welcome to this morning's Bhagavatam class. Thank you. Chapter Fundamental Principles of Material Nature, spoken by Kapila Dev. Okay. Here, the devotion service is explored through analysis. So, Kapila Dev's teachings are called Sankhya Yoga. Sankhya means analytical study of devotional service. So, how it works is the various elements are studied separately and understood how they are put together with the living entities in the middle. So the 24 elements are studied separately. So Kapila Dev breaks down all these principles, all these 24 elements and studies them. So it's generally, the understanding is if a person knows minute details of an object, then he has a very good opportunity to utilize it in the best fashion. For example, if you drive a car, if you're a mechanic, if you know every parts and parcels of a car, how they're all put together, how they function, and naturally you tend to be a good driver because you know how the principles of a motor vehicle works. How the engine works, how the tires work. And a person who is a neophyte driver or a new driver, he doesn't know the principles of how the car works. He might be a good driver, but he might not know the full extent of what the car can do. For example, the car might be punctured. For a learned driver, he may not be able to know by driving that the car is punctured. By an expert who have a very analytical understanding of a car, jumps on the car, immediately he knows by the movement of the steering, the wheel is there's less air in the wheels. So the more one understands the various elements involved, makes a person an expert in the subject matter. So similarly, devotional service, Kapila Dev takes an opportunity to study each and every element involved, breaks them down and teaches us how the whole principle is put together. So that's why this is called a Sankhya philosophy, or analytical study of devotional service or material energy. So the Supreme Personality of Godhead has spoken this knowledge many times. Here, in the beginning of this particular creation, or the known history, Kapila is the first time he propounds this Sankhya philosophy during the first Manvantra, during the reign of Swayambhava Manu. He speaks the Sankhya philosophy. He also repeats the same philosophy in Bhagavad Gita. The very second chapter is called the Sankhya Yoga. And then based on the second chapter, he elaborates further the same principles in the rest of the chapters of Bhagavad Gita. Again, in Bhagavad Gita, we can say about the chapter 4, Krishna says himself, Imam vivasvate yogam pratyavayana avyayam vivashvan manuve praye manu ishvagu abravit. So Krishna proclaims that I've spoken this knowledge before many times. One similar time is I've spoken this knowledge to Vivashvan. And Vivashvan has spoken this knowledge to his son, Vaivashvata Manu, Satyavrata. And Vaivashvata Manu has spoken this to Ishvaku. So this knowledge, Krishna has repeated many times. And we can also see in the 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, again Krishna repeats this knowledge, the Sankhya Yoga philosophy to Uddhava. So the same information is repeated again and again by Krishna in various timeline. So it's not something new. But here, this is the first time in this particular creation, Kapila Dev propounds this knowledge. There is also a Sankhya philosophy propounded by atheistic Kapila, a person who imitated the original Kapila Dev and came up with his own philosophy, and he called it Sankhya Yoga himself. The difference between the atheistic Sankhya and the Sankhya based on devotional service is the atheistic Sankhya just studies about the material elements and ignores the soul, and of course the super soul. So the atheistic Sankhya's background or foundation is the material world or the living entities are created through the combination of various 24 elements, and that's all. There is no presence of the living entity or the soul. And if there is no recognition of the soul, then definitely there is no recognition of the super soul, which is Krishna. So the atheistic that is the foundation of atheistic Kapila. But the original Kapila, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he does speak about the various 24 elements, but he strongly recognizes the living entity and also the super soul, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, which we could see in the previous verses where he talks about the Supreme Personality of Godhead as Paramatma. Subtle energy which is invested in three modes of energy. Where is it? Yeah, here the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the super soul. Anadir Atma Purushaha, and he has no beginning. So this particular element of recognizing the super soul and subsequently the soul distinguishes the atheistic philosophy from the bona fide philosophy of Kapila Dev. So the atheistic philosophy of Kapila Dev has become the fundamental of many atheistic religions, such as Buddhism, Jainism. These are all atheistic religions, and their philosophy is based on the atheistic Kapila's Sankhya philosophy. And even the modern scientific understanding of how all the material elements came together when the conditions were good. They morphed into a single-cell animal, and then those single-cell animals got together and morphed into a slightly evolved species, shellfish to normal fish, and then those fish, migrated to the land. So we can see how the atheistic philosophy is grounded even in the materialistic understanding or the material science. Of course, intelligent men, we are not interested in, as devotees, we are not interested in the atheistic philosophy. We are not interested in Buddhism or Jainism. But our interest is in devotional service, where the living entity and the Supreme Personality of Godhead, being the Super Soul, is recognized, is identified. Here, so it's a Sankhya philosophy. It means it's an analytical study. When it comes to analysis, even in the modern way of analysis or investigation, they take something called a methodology called 5 W's and a H. Anybody heard of this? 5 W's and a H is used for analysis. This is widely used principles in any kind of business analysis or communications or investigation. It's called 5 W's and a H. A similar principle you can see here. The 5 W's and H are, the W's are what, why. Sorry, you know that? Yeah. Do you remember? Why? Yeah, let's try this. Yeah, the how, H is the how. What, why, where, when, and what is the other one? I can't remember. Which? Is it which? I don't know if it is which. So a similar principle is used in understanding or analysis. In this particular verses, in this particular verse, the why, why principle and the H principle is used. The why the living entity has ended up, or why the living entity, or why this material world is created, and also how this, not only why, the reason behind it, and also how it is created. So those principles are explained, part of this analysis. So we will also try to see how the why principle works. So why this material world is created, and why the living entities have ended up in this material world. So the answer is given in Bhagavad Gita. Karanam guna sangarsha sad asad, what is it? Sad asad yonishu. So Karanam guna sangarsha. Because the living entities have decided to take shelter of guna, the 3 modes of material nature. And again, why they have decided to take shelter of the material nature. Again, Bhagavad Gita. What is that? Dvanda mohena bharata. Ichcha dvesha samudvena. Dvanda mohena bharata. What is it? Sarva yoneshu kaunteya. Anyone remember the last verse? Last line? Sarva yoneshu kaunteya. They are placed in the illusion. 7th chapter. So, Ichcha and Dvesha. So, when you dig more, why? Ichcha and Dvesha, Krishna says, Ichcha and Dvesha. These are the 2 reasons why the living entities are based in this material world of duality. And Sarva Bhuteshu Kaunteya. So, all living entities are placed in sammoham or illusioned by being placed in this material nature. So, what is this Ichcha and Dvesha? The Ichcha and Dvesha is the living entity's desire, Ichcha means desire, and envy. So desire to enjoy their senses separately of Krishna, and envious of Krishna. They are envious of, or we are envious of Krishna. So due to these two reasons, icha, desire to enjoy, and envious of Krishna, dvanda mohena bharata, we are placed in the world of duality, the place of duality. Dvanda mohena bharata. And in this place of dvanda, in this place of duality, what happens is moha. Moha, one is covered. Similar word is used in this word, mumuhe. Mumuhe means illusion. Not just one or two people, sarva bhuteshu kaunteya, all living entities. Not like one person is exempted. I'm special, so I'm exempted. You're special, you're exempted. No, everybody is placed in this illusion when they are in this material world because of this icha and dvesha. So that is the why factor. Why factor. And how? So these why, how it translates into how. How Krishna manifests this and how the whole material world works is also explained by creating this material energy. Krishna creates this material energy, and he makes the three modes of material nature to govern this material energy. And these three modes of material nature are sattva guna, rajoguna, and tamoguna. And sattva, what is it? Verse 4, chapter 14, text 18. Urdhvam gachanti sattvasva madhyam gachanti rajasa jagan guna nivartasya atho gachanti tamasa. So the three modes of material nature, according to the combination where the living entities places oneself, the how factor, how he is sometimes elevated to higher planetary system, urdhvam gachanti, sattvatsva, when a person is situated in sattva guna, is taken to higher planetary systems. Madhyam gachanti, rajasa, if a person is placing himself in rajoguna, he is put into madhyam gachanti, the middle planetary systems. And then adho gachanti, tamasa. So when a person places himself in tamoguna, and he is placed into adho gachanti, or hellish conditions of life. And again, how, why we end up, how, again, this how factor, if you dig deeper, Rishabhadev, Krishna, as his expansion as Rishabhadev, instructs his sons in Canto 5, Chapter 5, Text 4, Nunam Gachanti, what is that? Nunam Pramatta Kurute, Vikarma, Ya Indriya Priti. Nunam, what is that? Vikarma. Because of this Vikarma, one is placed in most Vikarma to enjoy the senses. Again, to enjoy the senses, one employs Vikarma, and because of the Vikarma, they are placed according to various material modes, and that material modes exhibit different living entities. So what is this Vikarma? Karma is generally divided into three phenomena. Karma, akarma, and vikarma. Sometimes, all these three are called karma. These are explained by Bhaktivinoda Thakur in Jaiva Dharma. So, karma means activities which a living entity performs, which gradually elevates one from whatever condition he is to a higher condition. So that's a karma in general terms. How does that work? So if you look at any non-human living entities, they perform their karma exactly according to what's the word? What is meant for them. You take an example of a tree. The tree precisely, every season behaves in a certain way. When it is spring, what season we are in? We are in spring. So in spring, it blooms. It produces flower. All new green shoots come out. It produces colorful flowers. In spring, like a calendar. In summer, it produces fruits, and towards the end of the summer, the fruits mature. And then when the autumn comes, when the fall comes, it sheds the leaves. And then in winter, it goes into a bit more of a dormant state. Precisely, exactly. They follow the same principle. They don't divert. They don't say, look, this is winter. I'm going to turn on the AC and I'm going to, start blooming. No, they don't do it. They precisely follow what are the rules and regulations meant for them. Similarly, if you take even slightly evolved entities like a tiger or a lion, even though they are ferocious animals, they follow whatever the rules given to them precisely by the material nature. A lion or a tiger, they eat. They're carnivores. They only eat other living or other animals which they hunt or freshly killed. They don't even eat things which are leftovers. They're not even omnivores. They are carnivores. They hunt and eat living entities. And when there's no prey, they don't decide, I'm going to go and eat some grass, or I'm going to go and eat some fruits. No, they precisely follow what is meant for them. And similarly, even other activities, even their sexual encounters, they are very seasonal. They involve in procreation only in the season which is allocated to them. Generally, in spring, all these animals become sexually active. Only during that particular season. They don't whimsically have children any time of the year. No. If you go to the farm in Cessnock, in spring or summer, you can see a lot of little, peacocks, little tiny chicks. Particular season, they don't move their activities. So these are, in general terms, living entities who are not in human form of the body. They perform activities or karma according to what is designated for them. And civilized human beings are also expected to follow their karma according to whatever is designated to them, and accordingly they follow that. And by following it, they place themselves in mode of goodness, and they gradually elevate to either spiritual life or to a higher planetary system. And that higher planetary system eventually turns out into Brahmaloka, and eventually they go back to Godhead. It's a slow process, but again, it's still a process. So the civilized human beings still tend to follow whatever is allocated to them. They don't venture out, even to this extent of Varnashram Dharma, your particular nature, so they follow only that particular nature. They don't, try to follow the nature of somebody else. If they're born in a body of a Brahmana, or they have the guna of a Brahmana, they tend to follow that particular guna and karma. Chaturvanya Maya Shishtam Guna Karma Vibhagasha. So whatever guna and karma is designated for a particular person, and they follow that. They strictly follow that. And Krishna again says in Bhagavad Gita, don't think that you're smart, that you can follow others' varna or other dharma. It's actually counterproductive. If you have certain karma designated for you, you just follow that. And just by following that, you will be elevated. So that's civilized human beings. And the next one is akarma, the activities which doesn't take you lower or higher, but it takes you to spiritual world, which is performing devotional service. The activities performed in devotional service are outside the realm of these three modes of material nature. eating prasadam, listening to Krishna's name, chanting Krishna's name, engaging actively in Krishna's service. So these are akarmic activities which doesn't drag you up or towards hellish conditions, but it liberates one from the cycle of birth and death. So that is akarma. And the third concept, vikarma, that's what we are interested here, which is how we ended up here, is vikarma. Vikarma means sinful activities. That's what Rishabhadev says, vikarma. Because of this vikarma, for what? For indriya priti. So vikarma means sinful activities. We are not just trying to enjoy the senses, but we are trying to enjoy the senses through sinful medium. And this vikarmic activities is what keeps the living entities bound in this material energy. What are these sinful activities? Prabhupada puts it in a very simple way to understand. During our initiation, we all take vow: no meat eating, no intoxication, no illicit sex, and no gambling. So these activities are the principal vikarmic activities. And these vikarmic activities, what it does is it drags one from a human form of life to various living, lower living species. Various living species. And that's the karanam guna sangasha, by association with a particular mode of nature due to the desire for enjoying the senses. A living entity takes part in sinful activities or vikarmic activities. And due to that, in a combination of material energy, we are given 8,400,000 species of life. And this 8,400,000 species of life, they root from these three, Rajos, Sattva, Raja, and Tamoguna. And these three gunas are the reflection or the perverted reflection of the spiritual world. The activities, the vikarmic activities, the karmic activities we perform, these activities are present in the spiritual world, but in a pure sense. So when they get reflected in this material world, they exhibit as sattva, rajo, and tamoguna. The sattva guna is the closest way the reflection is displayed. If you see a reflection of tree in a still water, you can see the tree very, in a more precise way. You can see how the tree is reflected exactly. You can even see some photographs of people taking a reflection of a particular object on a body of water, and the reflection, we can't even tell if the reflection is it's illusion or it's actually the object itself. So that is sattva guna. So the more the pure a sattva person is, the reflection of the spiritual energy, spiritual world is much more clear. So there's more clarity in that guna. So the activities performed based on that reflection is much more conducive because it has the closest reflection. Say if a person, say for example, if you're cutting your hair from behind, if you don't have any point of reference, if you start just cutting, you go all over the place. But if you have a mirror, it gives you the most applicable, exact reflection. And you want to shave or something, so the opportunity of you cutting yourself is less, or making a mess of yourself is less. So that is sattva guna. Placing oneself in sattva guna. So naturally, the recommendation is one has to elevate to sattva guna. And in this sattva guna, what happens? The muyaha, the illusion is less. The illusion is less because its reflection is much more close. The word here used, vilokya muyaha. But in other two modes, the illusion is higher. So the reflection, say if it's a windy day, the water is much more agitated, the reflection you see is not precise. That's rajoguna. Even though there's a reflection, but it is not precise. And activities you do based on the reflection is not necessarily conducive, because the image what you see is not exactly right. So that's rajoguna. And the worst is tamoguna. It's completely dark, and there is no reflection. The water is so murky, you don't see any reflection. And any activities you perform in that particular mode is completely wrong. And because of that, you get dragged down, or you're completely misled. So that is the tamoguna element. So the amount of reflection which we precisely can see will help us guide through navigating this material world. That's why Krishna says in second chapter of Bhagavad Gita, what is it? Prakate Gunai Karmani. No. What is that? Rise above the three modes of material nature. What is that verse? Anyone remembers? Anyway, Krishna says in second chapter, Traigunya Vishaya Veda, Nistraigunya Bhavajuna, Nirdvando Nitya Sattvasto, Yoga Kshema Atmavan. So if you want Kshema, if you want some good for yourself, rise above these three material modes. Rise above this conditioned three modes of material nature and place yourself in sattva. So he doesn't say, and one might argue, he says rise above the three modes, Traigunya Vishaya Veda, but place in sattva. How does that work? The three modes is, sattva is also in three modes. What Krishna is saying is, rise above the combinations of three modes, because these combinations will generate different bodies. As soon as just the sattva guna is isolated, it becomes clear. But when the sattva is combined with rajo and tamo, it generates living entities. It generates various bodies. And similarly here Prabhupada says the colors, the red, the white, and the blue. If it is white, it's clean, and it's clear. But if it is, as soon as the white is contaminated with blue or red, it generates various other palettes of color. A little bit of blue with more white and more red gives a particular color. More blue, less red, more white produces different color. So these combinations produce different colors or different bodies where the living entities end up with. But if one associates or isolates just the goodness, and then it's pure, and the clarity is given, and based on the clarity, one can elevate oneself. So this is in various ways, in these fashion, the analysis of why and how Kapiladev goes into detail and explains how the material energy is created, how the living entities are placed in these material, in the material nature. Considering a person like atheistic Kapila has come up with his own philosophy, slightly reflecting what the original Kapila said, all the acharyas make it very clear when it comes to giving purport to this chapter, is that the Supreme Lord is not subject to this three material nature. He is independent of this three modes of material nature. To prove that, Prabhupada quotes chapter 7, text 12, Ye chaiva satvika bhava rajas tamasasya matha evaiti tan vidhi natvaham teshu temai. Know that of all states of being, be they of goodness, passion, or ignorance, are manifested by my energy. I am, in one sense, everything, but I'm independent. I'm not under the modes of material nature, for they are, on the contrary, are within me. So, when we saw that verse ichadvesha samudvena Dvandamohana Bharata Sarvabhuteshu Kaunteya. So all living entities, Baddha, living entities are placed in Samoha, but not the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is beyond. Yeah, it's an important element we need to understand. The Lord doesn't get subjugated or come under the influence of these three material modes. He is independent of it. The Mayavadi philosophers who use Kapila's Sankhya Yoga immediately jump to the conclusion that the Lord is also subjected to these three modes of material nature when he comes to this material world. Or we living entities are God ourselves, and somehow or other we are subjected ourselves to this material nature. These are the various interpretations given by the Mayavad school of thought. But it is absolutely wrong, because the Lord is not subjected to these material nature, and he himself says that very clearly in Bhagavad Gita. Either he is acting outside of this material world, or when he comes into this material world and performs his various pastimes, in either of this state he is not subjected to these three modes of nature. Prabhupada gives various analogies to explain this. One of the analogy he gives is the sun. The sun is beyond the cloud. There's no way the cloud can overpower the sun from above. Only the living entities who are under the influence of the cloud has any influence. It can prevent our vision of the sun. But the cloud could never overpower the sun itself, because the cloud is a production of sun. It is produced by the energy of the sun. So it's a predominant, it's a subordinate feature of the sun. So a subordinate feature could never overpower the dominant feature, which is the sun. Similarly, the three modes of material nature is like a cloud, which is created only to keep the illusioned living entities within her clutches, but not God himself. So it's one analogy Prabhupada gives. The other analogy Prabhupada gives very commonly is about a king. The king visits a prison house. The king has his palace, which is created by his material nature, by his energy. And the king also, by his energy, creates the prison house. But the king existing in his palace and the king existing in the prison house doesn't diminish or enhance his qualities. He is king either way. When he is in the prison, when he is in his palace, he's enjoying his pastime with his children, with his grandchildren, with his queens, and these activities are much more pleasurable for him. Sometimes the king might carry a son on his shoulder, or might get chastised by his wife, the queen. But these are all sweet pastimes where the king lets himself to be enjoyed. But that doesn't diminish the quality of the king or his powers or his energy. But the same king, when he visits a prison house, generally the understanding is the prison house is for criminals. And when a king enters a prison house, the laws of the prison is not applicable to the king. He is independent to the laws of the prison house. Like a month ago, I went and saw somebody in a prison. They had like 3 levels of, to just go through and meet the person, you have to go through 3 barriers. It was a high security prison. But when a king passes through these, he is not subjected to, he is not an inmate. Even though he deals with the inmates, he talks to the inmates, he inquires their well-being. But the king is not affected by the laws. Similarly, when Krishna appears in this material world, he is not subjected to the laws of the prison house where we are living in. He is still independent. So he doesn't come under the illusion of the living entities. Even nowadays, even the prison house are much more civilized. The living entities are becoming so crazy that they have to be sedated. We go to the hospital and they're just high in drugs and they just act really in a aggressive manner. So the doctors immediately sedate the patient and puts them in a calm, illusory state. So only the people who have taken or been seduced are in a seduced state, not the doctor, not the person who is administering it. So there's a difference between the patient and the doctor. Similarly, when the Lord appears, he is not overcome by these three modes of material nature. On the other hand, he actually takes as an opportunity to perform his pastimes. In the previous verse, there's a word used, Leelaya. And when the living entities want to perform their own pastime, he gives an opportunity to this material world, so that they can work out their various desires and go to hell or go to heaven or try to get out. So they are trying to work out their own karmas and vikarmas. And the Lord also takes this opportunity to perform his spiritual pastimes. So he appears in his various incarnations. When he has a desire to fight, he appears, he sends his own men, Jaya and Vijayas, and he fights with them as Kurma or as Nrsimha. When he ends up having an itch, he appears as Kurma and has the Mandara mountain on his back, scratching him. So he takes this opportunity and performs various pastimes, but not necessarily he gets influenced by these material modes of nature. All right, I can keep going. It's 10 minutes to 9. I will stop here. If you have any questions, comments, please fire away. Yes, Prabhu.
Just wondering, do atheists come under the category of Nitya Bhaktas as well?
So, what's the question? I didn't hear.
The atheists
For the atheist?
come under the category of Nitya Bhaktas,
They,
eternally conditioned souls.
yeah.
Do they come under that category?
Well, we are all have been eternally conditioned. We are all Nitya Baddhas. We've been here as Nitya Baddhas, atheist or not. But that's the past. It depends what you want to do in the future. If you want to be a Nitya Baddha, you can be. Atheists and agnostics, they don't want to believe in God, so they still want to be Nitya Baddhas. Very rare living entities take the opportunity of devotional service and they get out. But in the material state, we are all Nitya Baddhas. Atheists or not atheists, we are all Nitya Baddhas. Till we make the process of devotional service, we successfully engage ourselves in devotional service. Even while engaging in devotional service, based on our anarthas, we are still bound. It's not like we are liberated. We are still very much bound. But at least we are on a good track. So eventually we have some hope.
Until one becomes a pure devotee, the term doesn't.
Yeah. Only a pure devotee is free from becoming. So there's various categorization of the Baddha Jiva. It's all explained in Nectar of Instruction, Devotion, or Madhurya Kadambini, various different breakdown of also in 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, when different living entities attain different gopi forms, it describes where they come from a Nitya Baddha background, or they are Nitya Siddhas, come to perform various pastimes of the Lord. So these are all described in 10th canto, Madhurya Kadambini, and Nectar of Devotion. Yeah.
Prabhupada extensively discussed about the jiva falling down. Is it
As I quoted, 7th chapter, Icha Dvesha Samadvena. As soon as one has the desire to enjoy separately from Krishna, and because of that he becomes envious of Krishna, so immediately, is considered fallen immediately. We just came out of a pandemic. As soon as you're contaminated, as soon as the virus enters your system, you're diseased. Immediately you're diseased. So as soon as the desire to enjoy separately of Krishna, a living entity is disease state. So he's fallen down. So fallen down is just a vernacular, but it's the desire. The desire. And fallen down means literally if a person is falling down from a spiritual world, I don't know. It's not like jumping off a balloon. I don't know if it is like a jumping off a balloon or an aeroplane. I don't know the technicalities. But in principle, the desire to enjoy independent of the Lord. That's it. That's all that matters for us. And how we curb the desire to enjoy separately, but enjoy in association of the Lord, or make the Lord the enjoyer. That's a principle, and not getting lost in the technicalities of if I flew down or that's okay. Yeah, go for it.
We talk about like conditions, so being conditions so that we don't behave any life. Are there like new ones that comes from spiritual world as well today? Like they say today, is there someone that in the spiritual world that is
We pray and hope that it doesn't happen. We don't want, we've been here, we know how it is. We wish that nobody, falls down. But my understanding is it's always happening. Because the living entity has a desire, has the independence. As soon as if he uses that independence, it happens. It happens. So. Look, Krishna has. It's not like Sydney. We run out of space to build houses. Then we have to go to Wollongong or Gosford. No, Krishna has multiple energies, so he can moderate. There's no housing crisis when it comes to Krishna's energy. He can accommodate as much as if living entities want to enjoy. He can accommodate many planetary systems, and if people want to go back, he's happy to take them back. It's not like there's people waiting for one person to go back and the other is coming down. It's not like that. It's not a recycling plant. It's like one person is dead, so somebody moves into that house. No, Krishna can manifest energy which to accommodate. If a living entity desires to be independent, he's immediately sent to this material world. And Krishna's energy can expand to accommodate as much as people want to do that. But the rate of fall down, I don't know. Because it's just inconceivable for living entities with limited intelligence.